Hi guys, welcome back to Water Nerds. I'm Kezia, one of Hydroviv's water nerds, and I'm here today with Dr. Eric Roy, and also here with Annalise, and we're going to talk about what's been in the news about water, probably at the same level of or more than lead, PFAS. What in the world is this PFAS stuff, right? So before we get started, I think it's super important to say that one thing that we don't do with water nerds, Hydroviv, is sensationalism. Like, that's not a thing because water is super important to your health, your life. You need water to live. Literally, you need water to live. And we want to make sure that the water that is coming into your home, or water that surrounds you or affects you or impacts you, is as good as it gets. So no sensationalized stuff. A lot of the articles that I've seen about PFAS, a lot of by some major news outlets they've been at best clickbait. But a lot of the information that has been in these articles has been boilerplate stuff. It's like they're copying and pasting the same stuff. All we know, like all you really see is PFAS. And if you get into the article, it'll say something like per and polyfluoroalkyl substances has been showing up in our water. What are you gonna do? Like it's never been. I feel like it's been a call to action on the part of everybody except who's responsible. Where'd the stuff even come from? What is it? How does it actually impact me? Are there health risks? Why should I be concerned? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I have Dr. Roy with me and Annalise to help break down some stuff. I'm a water nerd in training. I feel like I'm not like a water nerd. I may be a water geek. I'm working on it. I'm going to graduate to a water nerd one day. But they're here so we can talk about it and we can break it down and we can make it plain to you so you can understand what's going on. All right. So what is PFAS? What does that mean?
I mean, I'll cover that. I guess.
Yeah.
So happy to do that. PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a mouthful, but really the thing to understand about it is it's a category of chemicals. So under that umbrella of PFAS, you have things like PFOA, PFOS. One of the newest ones in the news is Gen X, and kind of speaking to what Kezia was talking about, a lot of these things, when they come out in the media, a lot of the coverage is based on what's easy to say. So I think Gen X was like one of those where it's like, Gen X. But it's just important to point out that it's a category of chemicals of which there are individual chemicals. Sometimes you'll hear PFAS referred to as PFCs for fluorinated chemicals. But really it's a class of chemicals, just like oils would be, except that you have carbon fluorine bonds.
Chemical talk. It's chemist talk. So I've seen PFAS, but I've also seen PFOA, PFOS. Do those fall under PFAS?
Yes. So PFOA, we have the structure of it up there. So PFOA stands for perfluorooctanoic acid, and that's one chemical that falls under the PFAS category. PFOS, which is the major ingredient in Scotchgard, stands for perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, and that's what we have down here. So they're just two different individual chemicals that fall under that overall umbrella of PFAS.
Right. So I guess what is like a plain explanation as to why people should be concerned about any class of chemicals under PFAS or any chemicals that fall under PFAS? Why should they be concerned about it being in their water?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Number one is they're toxic. We know that they're toxic, and I think Annalise will probably talk a little bit more about that as we go. And then the other problem is that they're persistent. And what that means is they just don't break down in the environment. So if you contaminate an area with PFAS, they just don't go away. They stick around for a really, really long time. So when you have something that's both toxic and it sticks around, it really presents an opportunity to, you know, have a lasting impact on people. So that's kind of the plain English definition of why you should matter. And they're all over the place as well. So they're things that are in a lot of the household products we use.
Stuff like was like the Teflon, like the pans, like cookware we use.
Yeah, so any kind of Teflon, you have precursor chemicals that you use to make Teflon and, you know, like nonstick surfaces. And PFAS chemicals are the precursors to that. They're the ingredients to make those things. They're also used to coat the inside of like popcorn bags and pizza boxes, things that you don't want grease to kind of soak through. So these are things that they're all over the place. They're using firefighting foams. They're very useful chemicals.
Right, but toxic.
But, you know, the precursors are toxic.
Wow. So Annalise, like, is it regulated by the EPA? You're a policy, like, is it regulated by the EPA or?
So it's not regulated by the EPA. The EPA kind of set a non-enforceable health advisory level of 70 parts per trillion, but again, that's non-enforceable. So kind of to branch off of that, municipalities aren't required to test for it. DOD isn't required to test for it, although they're doing a better job than municipalities, but pretty much no one has to test for it. No one has to, you know, they can kind of shed a blind eye and say, well, it's not regulated, we don't really have to be responsible for it. So.
Oh, wow. So wait, then, but when okay, so you said Teflon, Scotch Guard, firefighting foam. So this isn't new.
No, so this kind of category of chemicals was first created in 1953. Yes, so before
That's a long time.
Before EPA was even created, before, you know, a lot of things, and it was initially used in Scotch Guard. So it was created in 1953, pushed to the market in 1956,
Your
and it
grandma
wasn't
sprayed it all over her
all
furniture.
over.
Grandma did.
She put it all over the furniture.
I'm dating myself a little bit here. I definitely sprayed Scotch Guard on my couch.
Yeah. So it wasn't until the late 1970s that 3M was kind of like, who was a manufacturer of this product, that they were kind of like, all right, we're starting to do some testing. There's some occupational hazards going on with this chemical. But then again, like, the report was held up, wasn't really released to the public or anything. No one really knew about this. And then it wasn't voluntarily phased out until 2002. So it was pretty much just kind of known that there was probably something not great going on with this category of contaminants, but it took a very long time to get that voluntary phase out by one company.
So 53 to 02, that's almost 50 years. That's what, 2 generations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just used
Before my parents were born.
right. Used in just so many consumer products that we all are familiar with.
How long was I mean, do you know how long the phase out period was, or is it something that was just like
No, I think
or?
the phase out period was pretty long, but so the 3M plant in Minnesota, the voluntary phase out was in 2002, and the lawsuit started in 2000. And it just ended
Like this year, right?
Yeah, in February.
Wow.
Yeah, with a
Wow.
$850 million settlement in favor of Minnesota.
What?
Yeah, $850 million. And the money that 3M gave to the state was for, you know, environmental degradation, whatever they want to call it, but basically
It was a
the
settlement.
mitigation of this, you know, all of the things that this contaminant has done to.
Because I'm more familiar with what's going on in Cape Fear right now in
Yeah,
North Carolina, and it was
absolutely.
phased out in 2008, 2009.
And this was
Down
phased
there.
out in 2002.
So
Right.
and these were voluntary phase
All
outs.
voluntary.
Wow.
So, you know, a chemical company tomorrow could be like, let's create a product with PFOA, and they could legally do it.
And I think you just brought up a really good point there. The phase out was for 2 individual chemicals that fall under that
Under
umbrella,
PFAS.
right? So it's
That's- yeah.
PFOA and PFOS,
Yeah.
at least in the case of like the Fayetteville
Yep.
plant, right? They phased those chemicals out
But that doesn't mean others don't exist, right?
Well, no, exactly, and that's exactly what happens.
Mhm.
So the chemical Gen X, right, is another chemical that falls under that umbrella. So that's when the Fayetteville Chemours plant switched over from PFOA, PFOS
To Gen X.
to Gen X.
So that's kind of the trend, is that it's a replacement and then another replacement and then another replacement,
and just prolongs.
right, and
It's
it's
like
either
whack-a-mole,
yeah,
right?
it's either they're
Like-
more toxic, less toxic. You know, it's really hard to say with preliminary testing that chemical manufacturers do, but they keep replacing these chemicals and like.
So would this, like, from your perspective, would this even be an easy thing for EPA to regulate?
No, it's like Dr. Roy said, it's very persistent in the environment. So
How do you
How would you
regulate
regulate it?
And particularly with the newer class of these chemicals, like the Gen X's of the world, they're also super hard to filter out.
Mhm.
Like the irony of what happened in Fayetteville with the Chemours plant, right, was they phased out PFOA, PFOS, which can be easily removed on a large scale using just granulated carbon or powdered carbon. You know, and they migrated to Gen X, which is
Right.
much more soluble, and you just can't catch it in the same way. So the replacement.
So even the
Ended up-
approach to Gen X is to dealing with or handling Gen X is different than PFOS and PFOA.
From a filtration standpoint,
Mhm.
absolutely. And, you know, it's one of those things, it's tough. It's like, what do consumers do, right?
What can consumers do? Is there anything they can do?
I mean, right now, what we see a lot of is a lot of people waiting and seeing what's going to be happening. They're like, oh, well, the chemical companies should buy us water filters, blah, blah, blah.
And Chemours has said no, in Fayetteville specifically.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. That would be admitting guilt. That would be, it's just not going to happen, right? So they have to take, if they choose to take steps in their own hand, they really need to, you know, choose something that actually does what they think it does. And unfortunately, what we're seeing in Wilmington, all these other places that are impacted by Gen X more recently is there's a lot of like snake oil being sold down there.
Of course.
You know, you have companies coming in like, oh yeah, this thing's going to remove Gen X. It's like, well, where's the data? You know, I think
You absolutely can request data. Like, that's
Yeah, so
more than fair.
NC State has done a really good job, you know, pointing out that a lot of the reverse osmosis systems out there, they identified a couple of the reverse osmosis systems that do work. They categorically said that they haven't tested any whole house systems that work, which is super important to understand. We've had customers whose homes have been tested by NC State at showing that the Hydroviv filters do work, so that's another option that people have. But you know, we see advertisements all the time. You know, we have customers sending us screenshots of these people claiming that
their filters get rid of.
oh yeah, because who's going to prove them wrong, right? Unless there's someone actively doing it.
Right.
So, you know, I guess if there's any advice that we can give people, demand from the filter company that you're talking to, demand data. If they're saying, well, no, it's kind of a thing that, you know, it'll work, demand to see the data.
Absolutely.
The tests do exist. NC State is doing a ton of testing. There's no shortage of data. If their filters are removing PFAS, they should be able to show you that at this point.
I agree, and I mean, it's not a new marketing concept to kind of prey on people's vulnerabilities when
And
it comes
lie.
to and lie. I mean, you know, if we're being honest, they want your money. Like, and you're in Wilmington, you're in Fayetteville, you're in this, you know, this Chemours area. Absolutely, we got a filter. Yeah, we got you. We could, like, that's kind of what it is. Kind of the nature of
It is what it is.
business. Yeah, that's kind of sad. So, actually, it's very sad. So, the responsibility, unfortunately, for knowing what is coming into your home, your water, the responsibility, honestly, is going to fall back on the consumer.
Well, and it's always going to fall back on the consumer, you know, in the places that use private wells. So there are, particularly in that area of North Carolina, there's a lot of rural areas that draw water from private wells, and those people are totally on their own. EPA doesn't need to monitor. Like, that's the whole thing with a private well, right? If your arsenic levels are high, that's kind of on you to both identify and remediate.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with, you know, PFAS as well, and we do see that. We see a lot of people, unfortunately, who are saying, well, no one's telling me anything, so I'm good. And it's like, well, they wouldn't. You have no way of knowing unless you're going to spend hundreds of dollars on testing on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's nothing to say that if you test your water today, that in 6 months you're still in the clear, because these chemicals, like we talked about, they're very soluble, so they can travel, they can migrate.
Persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a worst of both worlds, right? They're persistent, toxic, and
soluble.
and highly soluble.
Oh,
So
man.
And also going back to your initial question as to why consumers should care, I think we should talk about the health effects a little bit.
Absolutely.
So I think that pretty much across the board, it's been testicular and kidney cancers have been the most common types of cancers that people who have been exposed to PFAS are getting. And then also problems with reproductive health. So, you know, pregnant moms, that type of thing is, not good.
No, that's not good at all.
yeah, I've talked to some toxicologists, like some toxicology friends of mine, that are saying that this is kind of the new. The horns are honking outside our studio here. That these are the new, like, dioxins and the PCBs, you know, and if those of you who grew up kind of in my era, that's something that was all
It's a
over.
big deal.
It's a big deal. So
BPA would probably, bisphenol A would probably fall into that category.
yeah, it's just it's everywhere. It's toxic. We know it's toxic. What do you do about it?
Right.
So it's a tough question, right?
I remember when we did our broadcast on lead in schools.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel like there is a period of wait and see that we tend to subscribe to, like waiting until local municipalities do something, waiting until the EPA does something, waiting until company that is responsible for dumping this chemical into our water supply do something. And very little of that waiting becomes, what can I do right now in my house to make sure as little of this chemical or none of this chemical is coming into my house and into my pots and pans and fridge and kids and stuff. It's going to fall back on us. You got to filter your water. Like, I don't know any other way to put it, because EPA takes the time that it takes. I think that's kind of been proven, especially over the last, if you've been paying attention to just water quality issues over the last, 6 months or a year, it takes the time that it takes. No legislation happens overnight.
Right, and I think it's important to point out that, like you said, legislation does take time, and you know, this has been a problem that's been happening for a long time. Annalise, you spoke about 40 years of contamination up in Minnesota, right? The other case study I would use for people that are like, okay, we're going to wait for the government to sort this out, is with chromium-6. That's another case study I talked about. There's been a blockbuster video from the year 2000, Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah.
It's still not regulated. So these are things, it's been almost 20 years since Julia Roberts
Played Aaron
Brockovich on the big screen, and it's still something that's just not regulated in drinking water. Legislation takes time, and I'm sure, Annalise, you could talk for hours about the regulatory process, right? And it's, I have a glancing understanding of it, but it's really the EPA, according to the Clean Water, is it Clean Water or Safe Drinking Water Act, where they say the Safe Drinking Water Act that they can propose a capped number of chemicals. Of those chemicals, they down select to see.
It gets whittled down, right?
It gets whittled down, and there's just no other mechanism for the federal government to do this. There are some states that are taking matters into their own hands, as they're allowed to, of course, but you know, it's something that if people are waiting for a right now or this week or this month solution, it's something, there's no way around it. They have to make those decisions on their own.
Yeah.
And of course, we're saying that, full disclosure, we make water filters, right? So I mean, we're trying to say this without being inflammatory, but like what Kezia is talking about. But if I were in those areas that are impacted by this and I had children, I would be taking steps to remove this from my water, even if it wasn't one of our systems.
And it's funny that you brought up chromium-6, because we know the health risks of chromium 6.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's been studied, it's been studied for a while and it's still not regulated.
Still not regulated.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that's a very good example
Mhm.
because if you think about it, PFAS has probably been in the news for what, a year?
yeah,
Year
maybe.
Change.
So-
it was June 2017.
Right.
when it-
So in terms of the regulatory process, we are unbelievably early.
we're so early. They're
So early.
They're still trying to figure out what the concentrations are, right?
Right, right.
So that it's like step one is assess the problem.
Mhm.
Step two is evaluate, methods, like what is a reasonable expectation of technology as it stands today to do
Yep.
it at the municipal level.
Mhm.
And then step three is form regulations. And EPA is very transparent about this in saying that they balance the cost
Mhm.
of fixing the problem with the problem itself.
Yep.
Of course, things cost money, and you got to do that. But what happens in that interim period, and that's kind of where we're at right now. It's like you
Mhm.
said, it's in the infancy of
Yeah.
of this debacle, if you want to call it that. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Wow. Well, here we are at the end of another Water Nerds broadcast. Thank you guys so much. Dr. Roy, Annalise, thank you so much for your insight and just, we're trying to make it plain. We're trying to make it as open and transparent as possible for you so you can know what to do next and you can do the best thing you can for your family. Thank you so much for watching again. Hey, if you want to hit us up, you want to reach out, you want to talk to somebody, a live person, it'll always be a live person. Robots are mad expensive. It's always going to be a live person. Feel free to email us at hello@hydroviv.com. Also, if you want to chat with one of our water nerds, you can go to hydroviv.com and look for the chat, and you'll talk to a live person to answer questions, and they'll know what they're talking about.
yeah. And again, and just to kind of build on that a little bit, if you have questions on testing, on if you've gotten testing done and you need help interpreting results, we're trying to be useful. We're not trying to sell water filters through that chat
No,
line. So
not at all.
we spend a lot of time trying to lower people's anxieties on this. I mean, we're trying to give credible answers on this. And like
Absolutely.
you said, someone who understands what they're talking about is going to be the one who picks up the phone. So
All right. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank
thank you.
you.